What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Photo Video Show. I'm your host, Mark Puckett. So this is part 3 of the Film Convert series that I've been kind of working on. In the first episode, you should have learned how to set up your camera settings so that you can make the most out of the footage that you're going to shoot. In the second video, you should have learned how to push your codec and your gear to see if what you want to shoot is actually going to stand up after processing. In this episode, we're going to now import that footage into our editors. We're going to apply a few things to our footage, especially Film Convert, to transform our footage from something that looks extremely video into something that looks like film. So I've got a lot to cover in this video. It is going to be a bit long, so if you're not ready for a full-blown tutorial, just go ahead and pause this or check it out after the fact, maybe watch it later. But at any rate, let's get started. Alright guys, so what we've got here are the exact same 3 pieces of footage that I had in the last video. I have the footage of the alley cat, I've got the footage of the blowing leaves, and I've also got the high contrast shot of the grass and the rock. So what I wanted to do first was just go ahead and let you know that I do have some resources available for you down in the description box below. So if you want to go ahead and grab those resources now, you can go ahead and do that, and then that way you can follow along a little bit better. I'm going to have a couple of pieces of footage that you can use to follow along, and I'm also going to have a couple of plugins if you happen to use Final Cut Pro 10. But even if you happen to be editing on a different piece of software, that's totally fine. For the most part, you should be able to follow along using the tools in your own editor, because many of the conventions are going to be pretty much the exact same. If you get a little bit behind, just pause the video, find out where that particular function is on your software, and then you can start the video again and we can go along. Okay, so in this first piece of footage, what I've done is I've added a little cutout here so that you can see this is the footage as it is raw, and the footage on the outside portions are the actual graded footage. And this right here is the graded footage on its own. And here is a 50% side-by-side so that you can see the change between the flat neutral picture style that you're going to get out of your camera and what you could potentially have after the grade with Film Convert. Here's the blowing leaves. The raw image is there in the middle and the graded footage is on the outside. Here's the grade all by itself, and a 50% side-by-side. And here's the high contrast shot. The original footage is there in the middle, and the graded footage is there on the edges. Here's just a different perspective, just so you can kind of see from different angles. Here's the grade all by itself, and here is a 50% side-by-side. So those are the 3 pieces of footage that I'm going to provide you with. I'm going to provide you with the alley cat, the leaves, and the high contrast rock and grass shot. All of these were shot on the A6000, the Sony A6000. This is in the neutral picture style, so very flat, and I've also turned down the saturation, the contrast, and the sharpness all the way down. I want to be fully in control of all those things in my editor. I don't want the camera doing that kind of stuff for me. So I got rid of all those. So what I'm going to do is I'm not only going to show you what Film Convert can do by itself, but I'm also going to show you my process. And I think that's very important because I think some people they don't know where to start. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my footage and I'm going to duplicate the footage and set it directly on top. I'm on a Mac. I just held down the Option key and then drug the new piece of footage up above it. This piece of footage is completely raw. No effects have been applied to it at all. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add an effect to the duplicated footage that's going to basically maximize my contrast. I'm going to go over here to compositing, and then I'm going to change my blend mode over to soft light. Already, major difference. If you have scopes on your editing software, I really suggest that you use them. If you've got an RGB Parade, a vector scope, and a Luma scope, All of those things are very, very beneficial to making sure that the RGB Parade helps you make sure that you're maintaining a good white balance. Vector Scope kind of lets you know where the footage is leaning to in terms of color hues, and your LumaScope lets you know where you're at as far as how bright your footage is or how dark your footage is. So what I did is I added the soft light to the duplicated piece of footage, and I even pulled up the definition of what soft light does. It darkens or lightens the colors depending on the blend color. The effect is similar to shining a diffuse spotlight on the image. If the blend color is lighter than 50% gray, the image is going to be lightened as if it were dodged. If the blend color is darker than 50% gray, the image is darkened as if it were burned in. Painting with pure black or white produces a distinctly darker or lighter area, but does not result in a pure black or white. Okay, so why is that important to you? Well, first of all, we don't want anything to be pure white or pure black, because pure white and pure black means there's no detail. That means everything is either blown out or everything is crushed. If you look at your LumaScope, which measures brightness or darkness, you can see that the footage has not been pushed up past 100 and it has not been crushed down past 0. So none of the blacks are perfectly black and none of the whites are perfectly white. Now you can, if the effect is too much for you, you can change your opacity and increase or decrease that based on your taste. You have to remember that in color grading, everything is personal taste. There is no right way and there is no wrong way. Everything is personal. You have to grade to a look that you like as an artist. This is an art. So you make it look the way you want it to, but whatever you do, when you're doing something to your footage, know why you're doing it to your footage. There has to be a reason why you're adding an effect or some sort of plugin or whatever to your footage. There's got to be a reason. So don't just willy-nilly your effects onto your footage, because it's very important that you know why you're doing certain things. So as far as the blend mode or the opacity, I like to start at around 60. It adds just enough lightness and darkness, but doesn't overdo it for me. And if you look here in the LumaScope, you can see it change. It spreads out that color so that you get a deeper contrast without crushing your blacks and without clipping your whites, even at 100%. So I'll start at about 60. That's where I generally start. It's a good base. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a blank adjustment layer. For whatever reason, Final Cut Pro does not have adjustment layers. So thank goodness Motion 5 does, so I created one and it's available for you down below. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to rename this clip and I'm going to call it Sharpness. I'm going to come over here to the effects panel and I'm going to pick up blur, and then I'm going to check the unsharp mask and I'm going to put that on the layer. Right out of the box, it's not such a pretty effect. But what you can do, and this is generally what I do, is I will change the radius to 2, and then I will change the amount to 2. I'll leave the threshold there. If I want it to affect less, I can crank it up some. But generally, right around 0 or, 0.5 or so is usually where I'll leave it anyway. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here for you so you can see what the effect actually does. So here is with the unsharp mask on, off, on, off. It really does boost those finer details. And this is a very difficult shot. For digital cameras these days, a lot of fine detail, it will either make or break your codec and your emulation software. So when you get something very complex like the fur of an animal, it's very important that your equipment and your codecs are able to handle it. So that is with an unsharp mask on. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new adjustment layer onto the footage. And this is generally where I like to add my emulation software. I want it to be on a layer of its own. Right out of the gate, I think it looks pretty good. This is Film Convert's default profile. It chooses no specific manufacturer, it chooses no specific camera, and it just uses a standard sRGB profile. You know what? Honestly, for the vast majority of people, it's going to be a really good starting point. But Film Convert Pro has a ton of stuff built into it that you can then manipulate and play around with all you want. First thing that I'll do is I will choose my manufacturer, and if you have any of the other manufacturers, if you have ARRI, Blackmagic Design, Canon, Digital Bolex, GoPro, Nikon, Panasonic, or Red, pick any of those. I happen to have a Sony. The only camera that they have that is in my line, which is the Alpha 7S, I'll choose that one. And the profile that I want, I like 2 or 3 out of this line. And I'll show you what each one looks like. Cine 1, it's a little too contrasty for me. Cine 2 is about the same. It's got a little bit different in the highlights. I love Cine 3 for the settings that I showed you all in the last video. And I also love the movie mode. It works really good for me. So once I've got the camera profile set up, then you come over here to your effects panel and you get to play around. The first check mark here is your on-screen control. It just toggles your screen control on or off. And this one also resets the position, and you can also reset the values. Now, if you're a good videographer, you should have exposed properly for the footage. But just in case you didn't, you do have that option with an exposure slider so that you can correct for an either underexposed or an overexposed shot. If you didn't get your white balance correct, that's naughty, but you can fix that. They do give you a temperature slider, so if you want to make your footage a little warmer, if you want to make it cooler, you certainly can do that. Now this here is your different types of film stocks. You've got your Kodak 5207 Vis 3, 213 Vis 3. You can pick any of these. Creativity and exploration and experimentation, those are all good things here. Pick something that you like. Pick something that stands out to you. I happen to be a huge fan of the Fuji 100 here. Love this particular film stock. And I also love the Kodak P14. Love this film stock as well. And I love the Super X400. Really, really nice tones with this with these film stocks. But like I said, you can pick from any of them. They even have Polaroid 600. So if you want that old Polaroid look, you can have that. You can even do Ilford film stocks, black and white. I love Ilford as a film stock. It's probably my favorite, my most favorite black and white film stock. And then, like I said, you can do the Kodak 5207 or the 5213. These are pretty industry standard. A lot of big names use these if they're still shooting film, and they work really well. So again, pick what you like. I'm going to go ahead and go with the Fuji Velv 100, and down below that, this is the size of the sensor. So if you want to do real crazy, go old school with this 8mm film, you can do that. It has a very unique look. It looks really authentic, in my opinion. You can do 16mm, 35mm, Super 35, 35mm full frame. And again, the size of your sensor generally determines how much grain is in the shot. So, you know, larger sensors, they allow more light, you get less noise in the darker areas, or grain in this particular case. But you can quite literally pick any one you want depending on what you like. The film color is really what Film Convert is all about. It is basically a lookup table piece of software. it looks at the profile of your camera, because your camera operates in a very specific color space. And what they've done is they've done all the hard work for you, and they have tried to figure out how to translate what the color is being interpreted as in your camera, and then reinterpret that color to what this particular film stock would have seen instead. So the film color, you can have none of it, which doesn't make much sense, but you can mix it into the original. You can have it at 100% film color, full conversion, or you can have a mix thereof. I actually love the look of a lot of these. So you can be fully creative. You don't have to go with 100% authentic if you don't want to. You can kind of mix and match it up if you feel like it. The curve is generally where you are going to get that particular film stock's S-curve. It's basically the contrast between the highs and the lows. The grain amount, you can either use no grain at all if you want a more video look, or you can have maximum amount of grain if you really want some organic feel to your footage. So that really, again, just all depends on personal taste. Saturation, of course, you can desaturate your image and go for a black and white. Or if you're really going for something extreme, you can crank it all the way up. They also give you here an option to render your footage with either your GPU or your CPU. Obviously, if you've got a nice powerful GPU, you're always going to want to render in OpenCL. It just goes so much faster. And then once you're finally done, you can even output a 17, 33, or 66 point lookup table. So that if you have multiple collaborators, if you have multiple people working on the same project, you can have a consistent look throughout the entire project. And by sharing that lookup table, everyone else on the team is going to get similar results to what you got when you designed the look. So if we come back over here to the on-screen controls, this is where you can actually add some pizzazz to your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. A very popular way to grade footage is to push the shadows down toward the blues and then push the midtones up into the yellows and the peach colors, sort of peachy reds. And then, of course, you can always push your shadows either down or up. It affects only your shadows. Midtones, highlights are the exact same way. So it gives you a lot of fine tuning. And then, of course, you can also adjust your levels. So again, you can kind of crush the blacks a little bit, push the black point in a little bit, so that's where black would start. And then they've even provided you a couple of little meters over here to the right so that you can actually tell if you're clipping certain colors and how much of that color you're clipping. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you what you can also get from these other pieces of footage that we took. This is the blowing leaves. Just going to Option click and drag that up. And just to save time, I'm going to hit Command Option C and copy the effects, and then Option Command V. And then I'm just going to drag my sharpness over it, and then drag the film convert over it. So now let me highlight these and show you what this footage would look like beforehand, after. Beforehand, after. I love the look of this too. But if we wanted to blade these, I can chop these up, and I can even take my film convert layer and I can change this to a completely different film stock if I want. If I want to do Super X400, I can get a completely different look right then and there. The sharpness will stay the same because it's roughly in the ballpark of where I like it to be anyway, and I can change that independently. And I can also adjust the amount of soft light, hard light that I want. So if I want to make it a bit darker or just mix this up just a little bit, I can adjust my contrast any which way that I want. So again, this is the high contrast scene between the grass here in the background. But even though the sun was shining back there, we can still see plenty of detail in the grass. And even though this was completely in shadow, we can still maintain a lot of detail here as well. So I'm going to option click and drag up, duplicate the footage, save time, Control Option C, Control or Command Option V. And then that way you can see, again, we get nice contrast, but we're not crushing anything and we're not blowing any of our highlights out. In the interest of time, I'm just going to bring over the sharpness. Off, on, off, on. And I'm going to use the exact same film convert layer here. So this is with the full color grade done, and this was our original footage. On, off. So there you have it. Hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share the video with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of video and you want to see more of them. Always, if you have comments or questions, leave them down in the comment section below. I do try my best to answer all questions as soon as I possibly can. So I want to thank you guys again for stopping and hanging out with me today. I'm your host, Mark Puckett, and I'll see you guys again on the next one. Peace.